Thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel as we strive to get a more progressive voice of faith out to a larger audience. Our videos are mostly from the pastor at Community Christian Church in Springfield, Missouri, Dr. Roger Ray. We are always pleased to have feedback from our viewers. You can visit our website at spfccc.org or write to us at reverend.drray@aol.com.
Well, this week's political theater opened with a controversy that I've actually been kind of waiting for several months. Rick Perry was introduced at the Values Voter Conference. I don't know why I wasn't invited to that one, but he was introduced by a prominent Southern Baptist preacher from Dallas, Robert Jeffries. And Jeffries took that opportunity to undermine Mitt Romney, saying that although Romney is a good man, I don't know if I can get that Texas accent going, but he's a good man, but he's not a Christian. He's a good man. And then he went on to explain that the Mormon Church is in fact a cult. Now this was bound to happen, especially as Perry is slipping into polls and Romney has remained at more or less a constant level of depraved indifference on the part of Republican voters. And it is true enough that when I took a course in American cult religions at Vanderbilt Divinity School back in the early 80s, that Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses, not to slam the people who built this nice facility, both were included in a course that covered American cults and Moonies and the indisputably crazy Jim Jones cult of that era. Currently, the Book of Mormon is playing to sold-out crowds on Broadway, and I have to tell you, I have purchased the soundtrack because I just couldn't wait for it to make it to Springfield. The Mormon Church does, in fact, in a lot of ways, pass the sniff test of what people would call a cult. They suffer from the inconvenient fact that their founder, Joseph Smith, lived only a couple of hundred years ago, and his very manipulative con man antics are well documented. So much so that the South Park episode that made fun of Mormons did so without making anything up. Now they did set it to music, but they just told the Joseph Smith story, and the facts are hilarious. But there's been a big public backlash against what Jeffrey said because, quite frankly, as weird as Mormons are, they've got a lot of company. The Southern Baptist Church and the Churches of Christ that we have in this area were formed as pro-slavery spin-offs of their mother denominations. Now, that's not anything you're ever going to go into a Southern Baptist Church or a Church of Christ and pick up and read in the literature that they were the pro-slavery split of their mother churches, but they were. And the mainstream Church of Christ ministers still regularly tell you that the Lord God Almighty, the creator of the universe, is so petty that if you have not been baptized by them, or if you go to a church where there is something as horrible as a piano or a set of cymbals or tambourine, that this loving and gracious God will burn your soul in eternity for the audacity of having a piano played in worship. Now, I want to be respectful and inclusive of other folks' faith traditions, but you just have to say, that's 32 flavors of crazy right there. That's just nuts. And Mormons stand out as a recent and uniquely American church, and you can make fun of them for their magic underwear, and I do. But really, how different is that from the scapular that you would get if you go out to the Ava Trappist Monastery and you see these little things that you can put on under your shirt and you wear part of it in front of your chest and part on your back, and that is to keep an evil spirit from jumping into your soul. Really? Really? You would have to be blind to not notice the fact that the world's largest Christian denomination, the Catholics, and a lot of their cousins in the Protestant world still insist that you have to have boy parts to be a spiritual leader. For real? God cares about what's in your underwear instead of what's in your heart? Is that Is that a God that deserves our respect or our attention? Please. I mean, it's 2011. It's time to kind of move past that. It's a couple of hundred years past time to move past that. And that whole celibacy thing, after all the sexual perversion revealed in the past few years, the Catholic Church still can't give up on their hypocritical veneration of female virginity and a male priest celibacy and condemnation of homosexuality. If I could just get an afternoon alone with the current Pope, I could introduce him to a dozen gay Catholic priests that live in Springfield. And I could also introduce him to a whole lot of very, very profoundly holy and spiritual women who are not virgins, who don't live up to that Virgin Mary image that they seem to venerate. When are religious people going to wake up to the fact that demonizing human sexuality is nothing less than demonizing humanity in its entirety? That silly stuff has got to stop. Now, after a firestorm of angry rejection of Perry's apparent endorsement of the ideas that Mormons are a cult and the Southern Baptists aren't, Perry's wife came to Perry's tearful defense, claiming that her poor husband was being persecuted for being a Christian. Now, Anita, I don't know if you watch our YouTube or listen to our podcast, but Anita Perry, I think you've missed the point. And frankly, I think you missed it on purpose. This kind of religious hypocrisy needs to be drummed out of politics. I must beg your forgiveness if I appear rude in my attempt at being entirely honest. But one of the things that I've learned in my work in addiction recovery is that you can love the addict and support the addict in their recovery, but you don't do them any favors by acting like you believe their lies. I want us to be charitable. I want us to be tolerant. I want for us to encourage interfaith dialogue, but I refuse for 1 second to act like I believe the lies. That's not good for us, and more importantly, it's not good for them. Progressive Christianity seeks to restore the voice of Jesus, who was one of the world's greatest moral teachers. And to accomplish that goal, we have to resolve to rid ourselves of superstition and belief in magic and any claim that any of the world's religions can claim ownership to absolute truth or control over who does and who does not receive eternal reward or punishment. That is an addiction that I refuse to play along with, and I hope you do too. The awareness that no one gets to own the absolute truth is buried even in the most ancient strata of the Hebrew Bible. So far as the Jewish faith was concerned, no one who ever lived was closer to God than Moses. And in this drama described in Exodus 33, Moses implores God to allow him to have the beatific vision. Just let me look at you. Just let me see you face to face. And God says, according to this text, something that needs to be said to Reverend Jeffries and Anita Perry and Mitt Romney and to you and to me. And that is that no one gets to see the face of God. Nobody. Nobody gets to know that much about God. Not the Pope, not Muhammad, not Jesus, not Buddha, and certainly not anyone in the room right now. God tells Moses to hide in a cleft of the rock, and God will pass by. Now, this is a very anthropomorphic story, and trust me, you really have to read these stories metaphorically. It's hard for us sometimes to consistently do that, but any time that God is described as having legs or hands or feet or a head or hair or whatever, you have to understand that's a metaphor. That's not any attempt at drawing a picture. But this one kind of has to be told metaphorically or anthropomorphically in order to make the point. And that is, Moses, who's closer to God than anyone else, wants to see what no mortal can see, to know what no mortal can know. And so as a consolation prize, God lets Moses see, in church we will say, his backside. But as my Old Testament professor said in the language of the 1980s, God was willing to moon Moses, metaphorically speaking, of course. And as crass as this story is in some ways, it makes the unmistakable point that if the greatest prophet of history is only allowed to see God's bum, then the rest of us need to assume a bit of humility whenever we presume to make statements about stuff that absolutely no mortal can ever know. The heart of the teachings of every faith is found in their teachings of ethical conduct in the here and now, where we live, what we see, how we treat other people. Anything that is said about what happens in heaven or in hell or in any unseen realm of afterlife should be taken with a grain of salt and a great big dose of skepticism. We don't believe in magic, but we do believe in justice. We don't want to teach superstition. We want to develop character. NPR was interviewing some Southern voters this week, always fun, asking them if they believe that a candidate's faith mattered to them in voting. And one man replied, "Well, it sure does. Down here, we're not going to vote for anyone that doesn't believe in the Nicene Creed." And I know he meant the Nicene Creed, but surely Jesus wouldn't be against us taking our vitamin B. I think, the Nicene Creed probably I could sign off on. The Nicene Creed largely focuses on stuff that nobody can know and nobody can prove, and we probably really ought to not talk about. We want to deal with things that actually matter and make a difference. Our spirituality must be relevant. It must be morally engaged. So you just kind of have to cut out the BS. In this case, as is so often true, the poet has a better grip on God's truth than the popes and the prophets. Michael Franti says, "I don't need a passport to walk on this earth anywhere I go, because I was made of this earth. I'm born of this earth. I breathe of this earth. And even with the pain, I believe in this earth. So I wake up every morning and I'm stepping on the floor. I wake up every morning and I'm stepping out the door. I got faith in the sky, faith in the one, faith in the people rocking underneath the sun, because every bit of land is a holy land. And every drop of water is holy water. And every single child is a son or a daughter of the one earth mama or the one earth papa. So don't tell a man that he can't come here because he's got brown eyes and a wavy kind of hair. Don't tell a woman that she can't go there because she prays a little different to a God up there. You say you're a Christian because God made you. You say you're a Muslim because God made you. You say you're a Hindu and the next man a Jew, then we all kill each other because God told us to. You know that isn't right. Let the people say, amen.
You've been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at reverenddray@aol.com for more information.